Welcome back, everybody, to Strange Planet Podcast. And for this week, in recent political news, Nikki Haley has officially dropped out of the presidential race, which is interesting because she actually did beat Trump in Vermont. However, she's probably going to need a lot more than just Vermont to win a presidential election. But regardless, for now, she's out and it's over. What are your thoughts on this, guys?
Well, I mean, from a voting standpoint, you might think that her votes will go to Trump. Well, from as I understand it, some or most of her votes come from people who don't want to vote for Trump. So it's possible they flip to Biden or whoever we put up there, because apparently Biden lost a poll or something like that.
Yeah, Biden lost American Samoa, I think, which is a territory that gets to participate in the Democratic primary, but cannot during the general election, of course.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah. So Puerto Rico, for instance, can vote for president, or they can't vote for president, but they can vote in the Democratic primary.
Okay, so what was it, like Hawaii, Samoa?
It's not Hawaii. It's out there in the Pacific, I believe, but Hawaii is a state, and they have Puerto Rico, Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands.
I was just going to bring up the Virgin Islands. Yep.
Right. Those territories are able to vote in the primaries of presidential elections because they're really private organizations that hold a contest to see who gets the delegates for those states, and the delegates gather at the convention and cast their votes for the nominee. Whereas an official election for president, only those states that are qualified by the Constitution to participate can participate, and the only exception is by amendment, which allows Washington, D.C. residents to cast their vote for president. But that does not include Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, and U.S. Virgin Islands. Those territories are not able to participate in the general election, but parties generally, they're Americans. They're in American territories, and so parties like to include them in the process.
Well, here's my question to you now that we're talking about this. Do you feel that they should be able to participate?
Well, that's really up to those territories, I believe. Now, the whole controversy with participation is going to be what kind of representation do they get in terms of congressional seats. Washington, D.C., for instance, they don't have a congressional seat. They have a representative who is a they can participate on committees and in Congress, but they can only vote on non-binding measures in Congress. So if it's to pass a law, DC's representative can't actually vote to pass or to reject a law. They can only do things like on committees in terms of like non-binding votes. They can say their intent about laws, but they can't actually count in terms of votes. What they can do, DC residents, is vote for president because of an amendment to the Constitution. And that amendment allows specifically DC residents to be able to vote for president. But that's it. No Puerto Rico, no Guam, no Virgin Islands, and no American Samoa.
I get the point of the islands that are not connected to the mainland. But what is the deal with DC? Isn't it part of another state?
So originally, D.C. was carved out of Maryland and Virginia, but it's actually listed in the Constitution as our seat of government. And originally, it just didn't have any type of designation in terms of a state. So like the Constitution allows states to set up elections and cast their vote for president, and sets up, it allots 2 senators per state, and a certain amount of representatives, depending on the population of a state. But since DC is not set up as a state by the Constitution, they can't, receive the representation that a state does under the Constitution. And there's been a huge movement for DC statehood in terms of, I used to live in DC. They have license plates, official license plates that sort of lobby for DC statehood. And it's a very weird dynamic in DC because, it wasn't until relatively recently that they could actually govern themselves. So under the Constitution, Congress actually has jurisdiction to govern DC, and they don't really have, local command over their city. More recently, Congress has allowed DC to have, a local government in terms of a mayor and to pass different laws, but those laws can still be rejected by Congress, and specifically a committee in Congress that governs DC. So you have now, for those that don't know, Washington, D.C. is a highly Democratic leaning city. It's highly Democratic leaning. And so that's one of the concerns about giving statehood or giving benefits that other states have to territories like DC, because it would grant power to, people who favor a certain party. And it's it's more likely that the party would be the Democratic Party. So that's a no-go for Republicans. And in terms, you would have to pass a constitutional amendment, and the red states won't go for that.
Big news.
They're not going to. They're not just going. Even though people probably deserve representation in Congress. They pay taxes. It's not like you live in DC and you don't pay federal taxes. You sure do, but you just can't have a congressman. They have a member of Congress, and she's a non-voting delegate to Congress, and she can't participate in any formal votes on laws. She can voice her opinion, speak on the floor, represent DC, and get her, DC residents' voices out. But she doesn't have any real power to affect decision making in this country. And so DC is a few years back, actually, DC was one of the first places to legalize marijuana. The city council and the mayor passed a law that just said, we're not going to criminalize weed anymore. We're just not going to do it. And that law was, partially blocked by Republicans in Congress who controlled the congressional committee that governs DC. And they said, you know what, your residents, voted for and passed this law, and other places were doing this, like Colorado, local governments, state and local governments were saying, you know what, we want to allow our residents to, smoke marijuana or to sell or grow it or whatever. And so Republicans said, you know what, we're going to put a stop to that. We don't approve of it. Not in our city, where we go to work or whatever. But this is where these people live. And I used to live there for some time. And it's just crazy that, this governing body of people who aren't elected by residents of DC get to criminalize things in their city and overturn the will of, the voters in that city on clearly what should be a locally determined issue. And so when they legalized marijuana, it was weird because you could not. So it turned out that the sale of marijuana was still banned, but possession, which, they can't say anything about possession because that doesn't implicate the Commerce Clause, which you need in order to have federal government involvement. It has to be something with interstate commerce. So the sale of weed is interstate commerce. So Republicans in Congress could govern that legally. But just possession, if you're just possessing weed, you're not selling, you're not engaging in interstate commerce. And so they weren't really allowed to block that portion of the law that allowed people to hold up to a certain amount of marijuana in their possession. So it was a very weird circumstance. And
weird and complicated, it so seems, and it doesn't have to be that way. Like,
it does.
How big of a city are we talking about? Like, if this was going to be another state, it would be the smallest state, I'm assuming.
So area-wise, it's not that big, but population-wise, it actually has a larger population than some states.
I mean, yeah, if you took New York City and made it a state, it would be ridiculous. But
oh, absolutely. But it's a city of, I think it's slightly over 500,000 people.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I'd say maybe
that is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot compared to like other. There are some states that have very sparse populations.
Texas, Arizona.
No, sparse. Texas has a shit ton of people, but as of July 1st, 2023, Washington, D.C. has a population of about 679,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is more than the states of Vermont and Wyoming, and comparable to other states like Delaware and Alaska. So it has,
it's nowhere near the same size either.
Yeah, no, it's like a city.
Right.
But the size doesn't really matter. It's.
Well, no, I understand that. I'm just saying though, if they did become a state, they would end up being the smallest state we had, area-wise, not necessarily size population.
In geographic area, maybe, but in terms of actually having a population, I mean, it's more than Vermont, more than Wyoming, yet they don't get a representative in Congress, which is really unfair.
Yeah, that's not right. That's strange.
No, it's not.
And, it's just an ongoing issue that's not going to be resolved because Republicans won't allow it. They won't allow DC to become a state. And, you saw this, back when states were still being added to the union, you had, basically two factions in the country where, let's just be clear here. There were pro-slavery faction and an anti-slavery faction. And the pro-slavery faction didn't want states to be added to the union that, didn't support slavery, and vice versa for the anti-slave states, faction. And so they just had like a compromise where, if you add a slave state, then you have to add a non-slave state, or a non-slave state, you add a slave state. Like, when people, I think it's highly underestimated how much something like slavery, affected this country. Like, we added states to the union based on whether they were going to permit slavery or not. That's how we added them to this country.
Wow.
And so to add a state to a country now, obviously we don't have slavery, but we still have those same kind of factions that kind of are more or less the slave states and non-slave states in terms of the North and the South. Today, we can call them Democrats and Republicans, but before those roles were sort of reversed. But it's just very odd that you have a situation where we can't really add states to the union anymore, even if we have people that want to join and have a sizable enough population relative to states that are already part of our union. They can't join because of this sort of political imbalance that it would cause, or, and this is, always been the case, but now it's not based, solely upon slavery, but upon the legacy of slavery in terms of the factions that have been formed on that basis.
You know what the sad part of that is too? I mean, there's a lot of sad parts, to be honest, but I almost feel like say if you painted a picture, say DC was actually more right-wing nuts, I bet you they wouldn't hesitate in a second to make the mistake then. But because it doesn't represent their values and what they're going for, and it might make them, harder to win elections, they're going to do everything they can to either postpone it or just make sure it never happens.
Oh no, absolutely. And you can't really say, both parties would be very upset if another state got added to the union and a state that didn't help their party wasn't also added to the union. Because it's a very tough every 4 years, like the presidential race is pretty damn close,
Yeah.
If it doesn't, pan out in terms of electoral college votes necessarily, or even population wise for the popular vote, it's a contested election. We don't know which party is going to win every 4 years. It's up in the air until the very night of the election. Sometimes even, afterward.
After that, yeah, that's true. Because we rarely ever find out the day of. So
No. We usually find out the day of. It's just that sometimes elections, very rarely have they been this close in terms of having to go late into the night trying to determine if there are enough electoral votes to secure the presidency. It's rare to have that go on that long, but we're just approaching a point in politics where things are just divisive, and every 4 years we stand to upend everything that we've accomplished or unaccomplished, and just reverse course, and that's not very good for the stability of the country as a whole. Forget policy for a second. If we're lurching to the right and then lurching to the left every 4 years, that's not very predictable in terms of our population, in terms of businesses and investment, and in terms of the confidence of our allies and the comfort level of our enemies, to be able to predict what the United States will do, and to for us to be able to project strength around the world. If we're in NATO one day and then say fuck NATO the next day under Trump, like we just don't have a stable, sort of presentation to the world. And
there's no stability. That's true. And I guess, moving back to, I guess, the Nikki Haley situation now that she's pulled out of the race. Now, the interesting thing about her is she kind of it's funny, every time Trump's name came up or something and she was interviewed or, she was talking about it, she always kind of half-assed the question, but then eventually you got a little more out of her, but you had to pry for that. And one thing I remember her saying very directly was that she was not looking to be a VP, and she was making it so seem that she wasn't really too interested in working with Trump. So now my question to you guys is, do you think she's going to double back on that?
Well, look, there's no telling what Nikki Haley will do because she has been sort of duplicitous previously. She worked for Trump. She praised Trump. She said Trump was wonderful. And then when she's decided to run for president, then Trump is such a bad guy. But then she won't really commit to completely, demolishing him on the debate stage, obviously absent Trump. But then, she won't cede the debate stage. She didn't leave until, just now. And so all I know is that if Nikki Haley bends the knee to Trump, Trump will forgive her the next day and she'll be out campaigning for him.
Oh, of course.
So really that option is always available to Nikki Haley. Trump likes people that like him. And so if you don't like him, there's still time to say, you know what, I've changed my ways. You know what? I love me some Trump. Oh, Trump, I'm so sorry. I don't know why we were fighting. And Trump would forget it because he just remembers what you say the last thing you said about him. And if it's a good thing, he loves you. If it's a bad thing, he hates your fucking guts. So this is how politicians work. But this is especially how Donald Trump works. People like to say that Trump is not a politician, but quintessentially, politicians will, they'll say this candidate is terrible, blah, 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 in a primary. And then, when they drop out, they'll endorse him and say how wonderful they are. But no one has done that more so than Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has said horrible shit about say Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, he said Ted Cruz's father helped in the Kennedy assassination or something like that.
Right.
And he called Ted Cruz's wife ugly.
Yeah, he made fun of his wife, for Christ's sake.
So then, Ted Cruz licked his ass afterwards. They're the best of friends, I guess. And so, one day Mitch McConnell is best friends with Trump, and then the next, they hate each other. That's politics. The ability to turn on a dime on someone. That is very much a part of politics. And people that think Trump is not a politician are just fooling themselves.
Yeah, pretty much.
Trump is a quintessential politician in the worst way, in the worst ways that people think about politicians.
Right. Because you realize it's like a light switch with everything. He'll be badgering you for God knows how long. And then if you suckle up or, you say something nice about him, the light switch flips back up. It's like, oh, okay, you're accepted. Come back. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's such a ass backward situation with him. And he's always kind of been like that. It's not even if you put his presidential, terms and him running aside and just look at the way he's been in the past, he's always been a douchebag. I mean, let's be real. But if you were nice to him, then, he'll commend you and he'll say nice things. But if you don't, or if you go against his views, then, forget about it. You're on the D list forever. And you know what I mean? But then it's actually, I should rephrase that, because it's not necessarily forever. Because then if, say some time goes by and then you say something nice about him, then he'll be like, oh, okay. It's all it takes. It doesn't take, he's not that hard to read, this guy. You know what I mean? He really isn't.
I hate this roller coaster ride. It's just one day it's just he looks like he's gonna get locked up. The next day it looks like they're gonna fucking give a slap on the wrist for him. Fucking, and I don't know what the deal is with Eileen Cannon, because she's fucking in and out of what's going on here.
I'm just hoping that in the end, this country has enough brains to know to do the right thing. Do they? Honestly, I don't know anymore.
And then honestly, I'd say refer to the movie Don't Look Up, and tell me that I have no faith in this country at this point.
I've been losing it as the days go on. I can tell you that. There's still some hope there, but you know what I mean? The bottom line is we've been here before. You know what I mean? And we saw his term already. And the fact that people want 4 more years of that, which was basically nothing, you know what I mean? It's just, then we wonder why nothing gets done. Because that right there is the reason why nothing gets done. You know what I mean? I would love, it's probably, unfortunately, I mean, I was going to say not going to happen, but maybe, you never know. We'll see. Maybe we get lucky. But I would love to see what happened if we had an extended period of time where we had just Democratic leaders. And I don't think that's really happened in a while, because like Rook was saying earlier in the episode, how it keeps flip-flopping every 4 to 8 years on each side, and, kind of cracks the stability a little bit. But I almost feel like paint a pretty picture here. Of course, this couldn't happen because presidents can only do 2 terms. But I almost would have loved to have seen what would have happened if Obama had a 3rd term. I really feel like that, you know what I mean? Because that would have been a total of 12 years. And I feel like everything he kind of started during his time was set for progress and growth in the future. But of course, that was all, shot down by Trump in 2016. So we didn't get to see any of that growth because he didn't like it, because, he didn't do it, I guess. And then what did he do to replace it? Mostly nothing with any of it. And that's why nothing got done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So, and like, I could be wrong also, too. Maybe if we had, 3 terms of that, say back to back to back, maybe it wouldn't. But I honestly don't think that. I honestly think that we'd be better off. You know what I mean? Because, Christ, if it was the other way around, all you're going to get is multiple tax cuts for the rich, probably more than ever. And that's really it. No one else is going to get nothing. Fuck healthcare. You're not going to get anything improving there. You know what I mean? And as far as inflation and things go, you really think he gives a shit about that? He'll tell you he does. But the reality is he don't give a shit. Let's be realistic here. This is Trump we're talking about, not he's a fucking clown.
Well, I mean, I guess he's not the traditional sense of a politician, but according to Rook, he plays the part of a politician well.
No, he does. That's true. He definitely does. I ain't gonna lie about that. But realistically, like, he's just a con artist, is what I was.
Yeah, he's not here to help anybody or do anything but benefit Trump.
Right, and maybe his crime family, but that's about it. You know what I mean?
I mean,
because that's what it is. That's where we're at here, and it's like this country can't get its head out of its ass. You know what I mean? Because the fact that that's even an option on the table just proves that already we may have not have learned our lesson. You know what I mean? And it's kind of sad to say that, and I didn't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how any other way to look at it at this point. That's just the way I see it. You know what I mean? Because sure, you might like the guy like back in the day, but that's not him anymore. And when you're, running for an important, probably the most important job in the world, especially for this country, you can't be a fucking clown like that. Or, you know what I mean? Like, it just makes no sense. And then we wonder why, like I said before, nothing gets done.
I don't think Trump's the cause of things not getting done, because things weren't getting done before him. I just think things increased when he got, involved.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it was a slow process overall anyway. But like, honestly, when he was elected in 2016, I knew for a fact nothing was going to get done, especially to help the Commonwealth. Now, if you're a billionaire or a millionaire, you're all good to go. Trust me, that was the biggest tax cut they got in American history. You know what I mean? But as far as the little guy and everybody else, please, he didn't do a fucking thing for anybody. And then he promised terrific health care. And what happened? Nothing, because they're not thinking about that. They don't care about those issues. All they care about is enriching themselves, and that's it. Everyone else can suck a dick, because that's basically what it's at. You know what I mean? Sad to say, but it's how the Republican Party is morphed into at this point.
Yeah, I can't even sit here and say something good about them.
Yeah, you really can't, because like policy, like I always say, is what is the proof. And like, I haven't seen any legislation passed. I haven't seen anything done that's going to make any American or average American's life any better. Biden got some stuff done. I know they don't want to hear that, but he got a heap of stuff done, surprisingly. And that's why I don't care if it's his head in a jar like on Futurama. I'm voting for it. And that's all we got for this week, everyone. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications. Strange Planet will have new episodes on YouTube every Friday. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.